So there I was, somewhere beneath Corfu, slowly asphyxiating a cave full of increasingly aggravated bats. Blinded, ears filled with nothing but the sounds of chittering beasts and writhing leathery wings, unable to properly breathe, and with very little idea of how to get back out again. It's situations like these that stir a deep primal terror, a kind of deep-rooted horror that H.P. Lovecraft so wonderfully captured in his writings. Everything in your upbringing and instincts tells you not to get into exactly this sort of situation. Spurred on by survival instinct, I grasped at whatever rational thought I could find, and offering a silent prayer to whatever deity that may happen to be listening, I paddled my way towards what I fervently hoped was the exit. After a moment of probing, I found a rocky passage and made my egress as rapidly as possible. Back under the open sky, I beached the canoe on a small rocky outcrop a short distance off, and attempted to calm my nerves and get some fresh air back into my burning lungs. As I lay slumped against the warm rocks, calling to mind the names of the stars as they each appeared in the flawless twilight sky, I saw a vast colony of bats issue forth from a cave. They really are such marvellous creatures. So bizarre. The next days, I'm sorry to say, I fared somewhat less well. After further exploring the island, I was unfortunate enough to be spotted by the Albanian Air Force, and even more unfortunate for the first time in years to be wearing sandals. So, when a bright yellow Albanian biplane suddenly barrels out of the sky, swooping down and causing me to fall down a rather steep hill, I wasn't all that surprised when I discovered, after limping to the nearest hospital, that during the fall the sandal straps had fractured my ankle and broken a toe. From that day to this, I refused to wear sandals. So, now having to haul my bag around on crutches, I felt it might be a good idea to find the fastest route home to recover. The quickest way I could find was on a flight leaving from Athens in only 2 days' time. I had to cover more than 300 miles in under 48 hours with nearly no money. Fortunately, I'd come to know a student on the island who happened to have a coach ticket leaving for Athens that very night. But if by chance he may be listening to this, I can only apologize profusely for my actions. Normally, I loathe to be underhanded, but sometimes it has to be done. So, whilst picking up various pills to aid my own predicament, I purchased a few iniquitous but normally harmless items, and with which I was able to mix up the mild poison I'd perfected whilst in the hell that is boarding school. Not enough to do any serious harm, but potent enough to make the victim violently ill for a few hours. So, some hours after slipping it into the poor man's food, I was well on my way to Athens, and a few hours after that, I found myself eating a full English breakfast in a Hawaiian-themed restaurant, listening to Italian music in Athens. One of the more surreal ways to start the day, I feel. But the day was to take a somewhat more dangerous turn of events. I was exploring the city as much as my injury would allow before heading to the airport, when someone who clearly must have thought I was wearing a money belt suddenly accosted me. Now, it's common practice amongst the more aggressive pickpockets to use a knife to cut the victim's money belt away from them so it can be removed easily. Often in their haste, or if the victim struggles, they end up knifing them in the back. And so it was that I ended up in the gutter of a back street, bleeding profusely. As I lay there bleeding, I had a moment of revelation, and what I'd learned in that moment I could probably ramble on about for hours. But the more immediate implications of the realization was that if I simply lay there, no one was going to come and help me. I could be there for days before I was found. No one even knew that I was in Greece. If something didn't change fast, I would slip away and simply be lost and forgotten. I was going to be dying alone, and when I did, it would barely matter to anyone that I was even alive. Bollocks to that, I thought. Get off your ass, Garr, and do something about it. I managed to staunch the flow of blood somewhat, and made it to the hospital to get stitched and bandaged up. Thankfully the knife had not ruptured anything vital. And so it was, the following night I was back in London. And a few months after that, I was once again poring over my maps, preparing to make yet another attempt to get to Anthracon. After all, I wasn't about to let a few minor injuries deter me. The chill hum of air conditioning awoke me to find an impeccably tidy room. A hotel room, clearly. The bright sunlight that filtered through the drawn curtains indicated that I was at least somewhere hot. Even though I had no memory of how I got there, this boded well. I confidently strode across the room and flung open the curtains to see where I was. Now, having never been to Philadelphia, I don't actually know what it looks like. But what I saw was a little too bleak, too sterile, a little too run down around the edges. And was that an ocean I could see in the distance? The website didn't say anything about an ocean. Where on earth was I? Some confused questioning of the hotel staff revealed that I had arrived late the previous night in a somewhat inebriated state, and they also informed me that I wasn't in Philadelphia. But somehow I had made my way to Abu Dhabi. I recalled there had been a war only a few hundred miles away, just a handful of years earlier, and knowing the US habit of bombing parts of the Persian Gulf quite regularly for the last 20 years, as I recall, I grabbed my bag, stole a hotel towel, and headed directly to the airport. It was there I realised I didn't have enough money to get back to London. So I got a ticket to the only flight I could afford that was going anywhere near Europe, and some hours later I was in Istanbul, Crusade country, only a short distance north of the ancient city of Ankara, but still far from home and still even further from my original destination. So I got myself a ticket and got on a boat for the Aegean Sea, where I spent several weeks island hopping around the Greek Isles, enjoying the sun and beaches and the numerous ruins and history, and of course the sumptuous company of those I met along the way. But all too soon I was back on the mainland, and once again in Athens. But this time I wasn't already injured, and I was more on my guard than before, and so I finally managed to see the Acropolis. It never ceases to amaze me how some people's minds only seem to be narrowed by the experience of travel. These were the Athenian ruins. I was sitting back and contemplating the significance of what happened in these buildings and how it has affected our world today, when my thoughts were broken by a very large woman with a Texan accent, wearing some stupidly patriotic t-shirt plastered with US flags and meaningless slogans about liberty and war. The unmistakable uniform of the worst kind of tourist. Her loud voice was grating on me relentlessly, and I was about to remove myself from her presence when I heard her say, "Well, it's hardly Dallas. I mean, it's just an old pile of rocks." I'm not the sort who's easily provoked or rattled, but sometimes some things just make me snap, and this is one of those things. I turned to the woman and I said, "No. No, it's not. This is the place that at the dawn of civilization, the first foundation of democracy, governing assemblies, science, maths, philosophy, legal trials, everything that's at the core of our petty excuse for civilization started here. And if you actually understood and believed any of that crap printed on your shirt, you'd regard these rocks with a bit more respect. Good day to you." Now, I'm not a violent person, but sometimes, just sometimes, some people need a really, really good slap.